called the fundamentals. And that's where the word fundamentalism comes from. Somebody who believes in those fundamentals, who believes that the Bible is literally the Word of God, that the Bible is literally true, that the miracles of the Bible are correctly reported in that text. And there's some other components to fundamentalism as well. I think we can all see at least how that is related to modern day American fundamentalists. And they didn't have any problem communicating. What they had a problem with was getting the rest of the community to agree with them. And in that sense, there's no philosophical worry. There's just a matter of social disagreement. So that for the first half of the 20th century, American fundamentalists decided, hey, we're not talking to the rest of modern America anymore. We're going to have our own schools, we're going to have our own teachers, we're going to have our own communities where we can practice the fundamentals without having those modernists get in the way. And it wasn't until the 1970s that the fundamentalists came back into American public life. And when they did, we were perfectly able to understand them. It's just that we modern pagan types, that's me, disagree with them. So I know what it would mean for the Bible to be literally true. I just disagree with my fundamentalist compatriot about it. And in that sense, part of what Peirce is saying, particularly in foreign capacities, is that we have no choice but to talk to each other. That's not only how we agree, but that's how we disagree.
Oh.
That's how we push inquiry forward, and pushing inquiry forward is the way in which we push our social world forward, by offering arguments, having questions, giving counter questions, and seeing how we can move people in one way or another. It's the guy who says, I know in my head that I'm right, but I can't explain it to you. That's the guy who's decided to quit talking.
Yeah, yeah.
And so that's the guy that Peirce thinks has made a decision not to become part of or to stay part of the community. And once somebody makes that decision, there's nothing I can do to make them come back. I mean, I suppose I could go to war with them, but that seems a little extreme. And we just disagree. So in that sense, the pragmatist, and that's what Peirce is, argues that inquiry, learning about the way the world is and our place in it, is just a matter of keeping the conversation going, testing the bits and pieces of the conversation to see which ones are worth keeping and which ones we might want to let go of.
And thus the importance of dialogue and public realm, where you have public discourse for pushing forward knowledge and truth and understandings, right? And I mean, I'm thinking about Habermas's notion of communicative action, which these guys know from intro sociology, but I'm also thinking of Raquel's writing a paper on cancer and the complexity of cancer, and Raquel, you were talking about blood vessels, you know, and stuff like that, and that's the lifeblood of the tumors, as well as the organism that the tumors are disrupting and settling in. And we've talked about those ponds, right? The pond with the tree on one side and the tree that has leaves falling into the water, and they decay there, and new sort of order emerges from that. But that water is important for circulating detritus or detritus, and that interaction, it provides novelty, new ideas, and so on. And so I think that there's something about talk and interaction. We talked about forums for interaction is important for social complexity.
Right, and it's worth mentioning at least that Peirce probably had a fairly substantial impact on that generation of German thinkers that includes not only Habermas but Karl Otto Hopf as well. So there is a continuity in terms of how these pragmatic ideas were disseminated into England and continental Europe at the beginning of the 20th century, and then had their own impact on how that continental and British thought developed. It's no accident that Durkheim gave a long set of lectures on pragmatism.
Ah.
Now, Durkheim was primarily interested in James, and he just thought that Peirce was so obviously true that he didn't need to worry about it. But this pragmatic view of how thought and inquiry hang together has had a long and important impact on European thought as well as American thought. And it has changed the way that people think of science. And this is an important extension of Peirce's essay here. So the set of essays from which we've drawn for the beginning of today is carried forward in another set of essays on inquiry and the fixation of belief. And here again, he's after that Cartesian paradigm. He's after the idea that you can unilaterally, in your own intellect, identify a foundation for knowledge. That's what Descartes wanted to do. Descartes thought that that foundation was based on certain propositions which he could discover by introspection, by looking at his own mind. So in the Meditations, I don't know if you guys read any of the Meditations, Descartes says, when I examine the content of my mind, I know that I have an idea of God. And he goes on, I know that I could not have constructed that idea because it implies a real infinite, which I don't understand. Therefore, God must exist independently of me. And if God exists independently of me, then who is it that guarantees all the rest of my knowledge? It turns out to be that God that I myself found in my own head, or I, Descartes, found in my own head. And once we get to that point, Descartes thinks that he can deduce all the other basic laws of reality in the geometrical manner. And this vision of knowledge built on certain foundations, grounded in intuitions, had a long and complicated life in the European and American philosophical community. And not only in the philosophical community, but in the scientific community as well. So there is the great French mathematician and cosmologist Laplace, who believed that everything had to be determined, and that if you knew the location of every object and all the